For decades, world trade has been dominated by the dollar.
The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world.
The SWIFT system, that actually became weaponized by the U.S.
The Monetary Authority of Singapore and the People's Bank of China have renewed the bilateral currency swap arrangement.
Saudi Arabia is in discussions with China to price some of its oil sales in yuan.
But as ties with Washington continue to be strained, Beijing and Moscow are diversifying.
China and Russia had taken another step closer towards dumping the dollar and agreed to trade in their respective national currencies, the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan.
But now the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa have announced plans to develop a new currency.
President Lula, don't worry, when we have the BRICS meeting, the issue of currency is top on the agenda.
The world had acquiesced to the US dollar as the global payment currency for international trade. This dependence on the US dollar for world trade may be on its last legs. Historically, we see that the Western hegemony has consistently brought dependency and strife to the Eastern world, and a new dawn is here as the BRICS alliance. It's an economic powerhouse. It's cooking up a new payment currency, a BRICS new currency, an alternative to the US dollar. You've reached the Financial Almanac. I'm Basil. And did you know that the US dollar hegemony had begun when the US has entered World War I in 1917 to support allied nations? The US was asked to send supplies, weapons, and other goods to help the allied nations. In World War II, the US was also asked to support them in the same way. The US, in return from both wars and its own industrial aptitude, became the world leader in gold reserves. The other nations have debased the national currencies because of the bankers' war. As a result, this ushered in the US dollar's international acceptance in two ways. Firstly, the US dollar was pegged to gold at 1 ounce of gold equaling $35. So nations around the world were on the assumption that if they held US dollars, they held redeemable gold certificates. Thus, countries around the world adopted the US dollar for trade since this pegging existed, and it was far lighter to account for gold certificates than to actually move tons of bricks of gold. Secondly, was the payment rails to allow for convenient accounting in a new era of computers. On July 1944, at the Bretton Woods meeting, nations agreed and adopted the payment systems that are governed by Washington and executed in New York. With faith in the US government, the US fell for temptation and spent newly issued US dollars without accumulating the equivalency in gold. The debasing of the currency was suspected by many nations, but the first to call out this malicious accounting practices of the US that had this exorbitant privilege was France. Soon after being called out, the convertibility of the US dollar to gold was suspended indefinitely.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Today, the US dollar is used as a payment currency for 80% of the world's trade and 58% as a reserve currency in many national and federal corporation treasuries. With 80% of trade still conducted in the US dollars as a payment currency, and many central banks and global debt is denominated in the same US currency, you have surely heard that central banks around the world have been buying gold at record rates. Leading the way are the BRICS nations buying massive amounts of gold ahead of plan to dethrone the US dollar. BRICS nations set to create a new medium of exchange backed by gold and rare earth elements. A BRICS currency could shake the dollar's dominance. BRICS are piling into gold and will continue to be huge buyers for the foreseeable future. China has added 102 tons of gold to its stockpile since the start of this year, January 2023, says the World Gold Council. The massive accumulation of gold has led by China. The theory that the world's on a long-term path to an economic bifurcation is definitely verified. The GDP and the PPP of the BRICS nations have outperformed the G7 nations, and gold is the key to this potential multipolar future, as it will likely be used to back the new currency creation that does not use the US dollar. The BRICS nations are in the process of creating a new medium for payments, established on a strategy that does not defend the dollar or euro, reports quoting Russian lawmaker Alexander Babakov. Babakov, deputy chairman of Russian State Duma, indicated new currency would be secured by gold and rare earth elements. The new currency would reduce world's dependence of the US dollar and the euro. The concept of introducing a new BRICS currency originated from the world's most recent geopolitical scenario. For example, 1. A post-pandemic world where currency printing, aka currency debasing, has brought us severe inflations, and many countries have noticed the dependence on the Federal Reserve interest rate affecting their country's treasuries in a negative way. 2. Weaponizing the payment system and sanctioning a developed country like Russia has sent a beacon to the world that anyone can be next, and if you don't stand in line, that's what will happen. Open a new tab from my previous video to learn how BRICS pay avoids US sanctions. 3. Today, nations, people, and their identities are more polarized than ever. So, with an emergence of this polarized world, where you send your money is who you vote for. BRICS have been promoting commerce using local currencies rather than US dollars. If BRICS continue with this plan and finalize the BRICS currency, it will assist via trade, swaps, and, stabilize their respective economies. If you want me to make a video on trade swaps and how BRICS will trade amongst its members, let me know by putting hashtag BRICS down below. The reality is that the BRICS tend to be mercantile nations. That means that they produce more goods and run surpluses in their economy. With a weak currency, buyers are more willing to purchase more from a weak currency since it purchases more and it goes further when acquiring goods and services. This plagues the BRICS nations since their currencies are much weaker than the dollar and the euro. And this has been a significant setback for BRICS in the recent years. By adopting a single currency, nations might limit their susceptibility to currency volatility and interest rate changes from the Federal Reserve when they quantitative ease or quantitative tightening. This improves the economic stability and lowers the likelihood of financial crisis contagions. BRICS nations have been hit by these downturns, and the drop has compelled these countries to establish a unified currency. A BRICS resolution suggests a strong hostility to dollar weaponization. We see the deterioration of US-China ties. A dominant US currency can threaten Chinese commerce and technology. China is compelled to abandon the US dollar-dominated infrastructure and perhaps develop an alternative currency. Brazil's reliance on the dollar is profound. It's almost 90% of its exports is denominated in dollar, but the US only gets 17% of its total exports. This disparity promotes Brazil to establish a BRICS currency. Russia was the first to vocalize and long sought to have BRICS further the concept of de-dollarization. Russia has been removed from the Western-led payment infrastructure, and it's definitely closed off from the dollar-dominated financial structure. Russia has advocated the notion of a financial system free of Western dominance. India watched as China attempted to internationalize their renminbi, thus inspiring India to advocate the broader use of rupee for more international transactions. Thus, India is attempting to wean itself off of the US dollar. Let's call the hypothetical new currency, cement, commodified energy metals, enterprising network token. Cement would remove any impediment that would now thwart their efforts to escape the dollar hegemony. Cement could actually fund the entirety of the BRICS nations' import bills by themselves. BRICS would also be poised to achieve a level of self-sufficiency in international trade. Its members would likely be able to produce a wider range of goods than any existing monetary union. This includes the World Trade Organization and IMF. Each member of the BRICS alliance would be essentially an economic heavyweight. Countries around the world would likely be willing to do business with each other using cement. Goods produced in BRICS countries can also circumvent trade restrictions by being exported to and then re-exported from a third-party country. The dollar will still be quite dominant in this multipolar era. The BRICS currency is unlikely to be successful in reducing the importance of the US Federal Reserve notes in global markets. Despite the creation of an alternative currency for trade, forces are at play that keep the US Treasury bond the majority of reserve assets around the world until proven otherwise. Another issue includes who will manage the details between BRICS' many central banks, essentially an inter-central bank management that takes place between multiple countries with different economies and different inflation rates, exporting profiles. US capital markets are the most deepest and most liquid in the world, which is very difficult to replicate. Relative to most other countries, the Federal Reserve is considered to be quite transparent, and many would say it's trustworthy, although it won't allow an audit at this private institution. Root once said there will come a time when the US dollar is no longer the world currency, as in everything comes to an end. However, for now, there's only one currency, and that is the US dollar. Let me know your personal thoughts in the comments section. I would genuinely love to hear them. And thank you for watching Financial Almanac. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in this next video.